So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this evening. It's a gentleman by the name of Mr. David Brass from the Lakes Free Range Egg Company. The bio I have here is that David and Helen Brass were a small family farm with beef and sheep in the Lake District who decided to keep a few hens in 1989. That was a good year to start because I remember that was the year that Edwina Currie opened a gob about eggs in the UK, and the egg market collapsed almost overnight. But they stuck with it and they set up the Lakes Free Range Egg Company in 1996. Interesting mission statement: to profitably pack free range and organic free range eggs to the highest sustainability and welfare standards. A thing that they think they've achieved. They pack entirely free range eggs and have grown from packing 5 million eggs in 1997 to over 500 million eggs in 2020. They pride themselves in leading innovation in their approach to production, welfare and business. I am really looking forward to hearing from this gentleman. So ladies and gentlemen, can I pass you over to Mr. David Brass. David.
Good evening. I shall try and share screens if at all possible. Can you all see that? Good. Yes, thank you for the introduction. That's a lot to live up to, I guess, Richard. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak at the conference, and Wales is one of those countries where I've got a lot of happy memories. You maybe don't, because I used to be in the Air Force, so I flew out of Valley and Anglesey and Brawdy down in near H West, lived in H West for a while. So I probably annoyed you all as farmers in Wales at that time, but you're all too young to remember those days. Yes, right. As the mayor kind of said, we small family farm, went off to university. Did university, went off to join the Air Force, flew in the Air Force for 10 years, came back to the family farm in 1989, and it was 120 acres, severely disadvantaged land, beef and sheep. So we had to look at something else. And Helen, my wife, we did all the usual things like lambing early, sort of in December, so you got the Easter lamb trade. Then used those sheep sheds in the summer to rear turkeys for the local meat business. Got rid of those in the middle of December so you could lamb for the next crop. And then one of the things that we had was Helen would have these 200 hens. So it's Helen's fault, really. It's been Helen's fault all the way through, I guess. I can say that because she's not here. No, to be fair, it's been a business partnership that's worked really, really well as the managers worked really well through all that time. And those gradually built up. After Edwina Currie did her bit in 1989, the market collapsed for several months, and when it recovered with people thinking free range were a better class of egg. Whether that's a healthier class of egg, whether that's right or wrong is debatable, but that was what the public perception. So we were approached by our feed company, which happened to be Cars Agriculture at the time, could we supply them some eggs? And gradually over the next 5 or 6 years, that flock grew to what at those times was a mighty 9,000 chickens. Nowadays, entry level is probably 32,000, but it shows how life goes, I guess. And then they packed up packing eggs. So we had to look at what else to do. We decided we'd pack our own, hence the 1996 set up the Lakes Free Range Egg Company. And then it's been a kind of hang on to the tails, and the journey just took off since then. So from a small family farm diversification to this year's figures will probably turn over 50 million. I mentioned 500 million eggs packed off probably 72 now. Supply farmers have contracts to us with about 2 million hens on those. And as a spin-off out of those companies has come a pullet rearing company, which rears pullets from day-old chicks to point of lay, teenagers effectively, as well as a development business that's built the factory and various staff accommodations of one sort or another and builds houses and things now, and a couple of other farming companies that farm probably 550 acres now with about 150,000 birds of our own. So it's with 100 plus employees. So it's grown significantly and changed the farm out of all recognition. So I don't know if that's an example to be good or not, but it's been an interesting ride. It gets more to the point of the talk, really. One of the things that we've done as part of that journey is agriculturally be very close to our customers. One of which in probably 2007-ish, I was claiming that we need to plant trees for chickens. It's better welfare benefits and that sort of thing, and they need to pay more for it, adding value to the product effectively. And they said, prove it. So we linked with Farm Animal Initiative, which is the old Oxford University research farm, to do just that and prove it, put science into what we do. And that was a huge learning for me. Although I'd been to university and done a degree in agriculture, I hadn't really realize the importance of science into what you do. So now everything that we do, we try to be leading edge with and involve some sort of scientific backup. And to be honest, you'll all know, you're all farmers, you know exactly what happens. I call them snake oil salesmen. These guys turn up on your doorstep and try and flog you something that will get you 20 more eggs and 10% less mortality. And isn't it wonderful? And actually no science behind it at all. So that's very much drives us now, leading edge innovation and science. And this is just, for those of you in the poultry industry, I just thought I'd give you a couple of questions that drive me in particular, but our company in general. What was free range mortality in 1989 when we first started, and what is it now? What was it last year? Well, I can tell you, if you aren't in the poultry industry, in 1989, it was our first flock went through with 8.2% mortality. Last year across the UK, guess what? 30 years later, we're about 8.2% mortality across the whole of the UK flock. So I'm not sure that's a way to end your career. And the other thing is, how do you know your chickens are ill? And by and large, it's when you find them dead on the floor. And again, in the 21st, there might be a few little production hiccups, but by and large, you know they're ill when you find them dead on the floor. In the 21st century, that has to be wrong. So those are two key things that drive me nowadays. And on the back of that, if you're improving welfare, you're improving mortality, you're improving profitability in your farms. So that it's a win-win situation, I guess. And that's led us to end up embracing data collection, sensor technology, artificial intelligence in interpreting that. You can't be there all the time, but your computer can. And then when we started to do that, started to look at the future, what we found was that the data systems that are out there were invariably designed by engineers to report something in a shed somewhere. They weren't designed to be used by a farmer on a farm in farming circumstances and get management decisions out of them that you want. So we decided we'd work with FAI again, just happened to be to the link to develop a real-time data system for collecting that data as solidly as possible automatically. And so we've been doing that for probably 5 years now. And what that has done is, as people realize, we're one of the few poultry companies in the country that can really nail down data on a minute-by-minute basis, has got lots of links with universities doing research projects. But what it has shown us actually is that we're on the cusp of a completely new set of ladders to climb up to get performance and production. And I think that's all animal production systems, all farming systems. It's not just poultry. The dairy industry probably leads in that at the moment. Beef and sheep are way down the back of the pack. They haven't even set off yet. And the poultry industry is probably somewhere in the middle. But it's something that you guys, as the future of farming, need to accept, and probably the ideal people to accept because you've grown up with smartphones. Although having said that, the data system we've developed for on farm, we have an 80-year-old farmer, 82 years old actually, who still owns a Nokia. And those of you who remember Nokia, it's a long way off a smartphone, but he can still operate the technology, and that's what you need in these data systems. Bit more about them really. Artificial intelligence is, and use of blockchain technology to link all that together, is something that we need to develop, and it's very early days, certainly in the poultry industry. But if you have data that you can use, we should be able to diagnose animals being ill before they're ill. So then can you treat them with probiotics, with vitamins, electrolytes, so you don't need to treat them with antibiotics. Linking that through to what real-time data systems, and then coming on from on the back of that, things like acoustics, which I'll talk a little bit about later, and thermal imaging and modern sense technology, even things, robots that can run around your chicken shed sniffing out disease, so they can smell the chemicals given off by your chickens or your animals when they're ill. So again, to get increased performance, increase economic performance, keep people in business, and at the same time give you better welfare and more production. And it's actually kind of a fun place to be in, to be honest, to be doing all that sort of work. Why benefit of reliable data? What we found was that there's a lot of data systems out there. They either report data very haphazardly, or in a format that's suitable for the building designer, but it's rubbish to manage your birds, animals with. And it's got to be reliable, and it's got to be real time. And I'm a farmer, I hold my hands up, and bless you, it's probably the same. If it comes to reporting stuff into a computer system off a fag packet on a Saturday afternoon, it won't get done correctly. So what we decided to do on farm is report everything, if at all possible, automatically. So things like mortality, obviously you have to report individually, but things like temperatures, water consumption, feed consumption, bin weights, ammonia, carbon dioxide, all of those sort of stuff, bird movement, bird sounds. If it's all recorded automatically, it's the only way to go, the only way to go. And why is somebody ringing me at this time on a Monday night? But anyway, not to worry. If we marry the old technology, if marry new technologies to old style stockmanship, you get the best of both worlds. What you tend to find is people think, oh, I've got technology, it'll do away with the stockman. It doesn't, it won't. It complements. You can't be there all day, every day in your chicken shed, in your sheep shed, but the technology can. So what it does do is it gives you tools you can use, and it also puts numbers to it. If you know the bird temperature is X temperature, you can say, if you know they're eating 20 kilos across the flock yesterday, or 120 grams per bird yesterday, and they're only eating 110 today, that's probably a clue something's wrong with them. So you've got numbers. And when you can then give those numbers to your vets and to your advisors, it allows them to diagnose stuff much, much better. What are we actually doing at the moment? Things leading edge research we're doing, the data's there, the data system's there, we're using that and interpreting that, but some of the stuff we're developing with our research partners, people like Newcastle University, Bristol University. The acoustics is a classic. Newcastle a year or two ago showed that if you get a day-old chick is simple. All it can say is one thing: cheap. That's it. And it says cheap in different tones and different speeds. And if it goes cheap, 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 cheap on the first day of its life, it is saying, where's mum? But if it does it on the second day of its life, it is because it's stressed. And if it's stressed on the second day of its life, directly linked to that is weight at 37 days and mortality. So that was the first bit of work that Newcastle had done on that, Lucy Asher and her team there. So where we were looking at that and seeing if we link that into adult birds, much more complex sounds. But again, you're all stockmen. You all know what it's like. You can tell there's something wrong in your chicken shed, in your cattle shed, in your dairy unit before you ever go in the doorway. It's the sound they make as you approach the shed. You just know it. You just feel it. Can we link that to microphones? And yes, we have. There's 26 different sounds we've recorded so far out of adult birds, of which we know about 16 of them mean. The rest of it involves a lot of time sitting and watching in chicken sheds trying to work out what, because they're not the obvious ones. But again, if they can tell you stuff, they can tell you there's a water leak, they can tell you there's a panic problem, they can tell you there's a smothering issue. So I just find that fascinating area to be in. It's leading edge and it's fun to be in. Now, it's just anybody who ever has an inclination to do that, get involved. Science goes down the wrong routes unless the farmers are in there telling them the route they should be going down. At a conference of the senior poultry researchers just before lockdown last year, actually, in the country, and I asked them one question. As a farmer, there was two of us there, David Speller and myself were there, and we asked them, I asked them, what is the biggest single cause of mortality in the free-range laying industry? Not one of the senior researchers in the UK knew the answer. Because they need to have people with wellies on. You guys, get involved. I would really suggest that. Anyway, adult vocabulary. So we're working on that. And pitch and stress is another thing. Quite often, as birds want to do silly things like pile up in a heap in the floor in the middle of the afternoon and suffocate themselves, they tell you beforehand the pitch changes, the stress levels in the voice, so the pitch changes. That can be picked up automatically. Again, leading edge stuff, but it's a fun place to be, and potentially going forward, that can be massive, massive benefits. If you're ever looking at any of these data systems, ask the person who's selling it to you, what management decision have you made? Because there's lots and lots of people out there who'll say, we've got a wonderful data system, but unless you can actually use it to make management decisions, it's a waste of time. Because you want to make decisions that will make you keep your birds, you keep your animals alive and make you more money. Like I've mentioned before, it needs to be real time, it needs to be automated, and at the same time, it needs to integrate all the data sources. If you have whatever data source you have, it needs to be put into that system and integrated. It's useless having them on their own. Some of the building systems you can get out there at the moment, they'll show you temperature, they'll show you feed consumption, they'll show you water consumption. But it's all individual screens. It's not linked together in synchronized real time. And that's where it needs to be. And it also needs to connect seamlessly to the outside world. We all have poor internet connection. Data systems love a hardwire. Direct hardwire to the internet, they just love. If they haven't got that, you can cope with Wi-Fi. Direct Wi-Fi links up to 10 kilometers. It's only 80 quid, so and just bolt them to the wall. The system we have also has GSM, so if you have a phone signal, it goes hardwire, Wi-Fi link, GSM in its own selection. And the absolute last case scenario is you have an app on your phone, and that's completely automatic. As you walk in the shed, the box on the wall in the shed says, I haven't talked to anybody for 2 days. I need to get my data out of here. And your phone says, oh, I'll take it for you. Then all without you getting involved. And then your phone downloads all the data to it. And then when it gets to somewhere where it's got a phone connection, it uploads it to the cloud. So those sort of connectivity needs to be there. And a lot of them just aren't. They don't give you that. If you don't have a hardwire, you're stuffed. So it's really important that as well. And then when you've got all of that, it needs to be cloud-based. It needs to communicate. What you tend to find here, I get a farmer, one of my contracted farmers, ring up at 2:30 on a Friday afternoon. I think I've got a bit of a problem, David. Oh, what's the problem? Well, I've got a little bit of extra mortality and they're not quite eating as much. And that's the best they had on farm as a recording. Nowadays, what you need to be able to do is to link that directly in. The farmer has a button, so because it's his information, it's his data, it's not yours. He presses his button and he can send it to the vet, to his advisor, to his auditor, to his manager, or to whoever. And then you can look at the same information he's got on screen, real time. So that's just the future of where we need to be. And it also gets things like auditors. We all know auditors online tonight, I think we all hate auditors. They all just create work and paperwork and nobody loves them. But what this sort of thing can do is you can just get reports out, and we're just designing some now for things like Lion Code, where all the data it collects, it has in there that's required on a Lion audit, it just dumps it to the Lion auditor and he can have it. Just the stuff he needs for his audit, not all the rest of it. But again, it just takes all that paperwork away. So it's a useful tool to have, and it gives you instant access all the time. And the other thing it needs to do is give real-time, honest, reliable alerts for everything you possibly think of. I think we've got about 51 different alerts in the system at the moment. And there'll be more as the system develops. But again, if there's a water leak, is the serious water leak, is a minor water leak, but it's 11 o'clock at night, it's probably better knowing than not. Has feed consumption gone down up too much, gone up too much, all sorts of things like that. I guess it's just useful information to have. And this is the sort of display that we get. That's a bit complicated and it doesn't show a particularly good flock, but I'll show you a little bit more about this one. A bit closer up. Green line is production. Green dotted line is where production ideal target should be. So these birds came in quite nicely. They were actually part of a flock that we were doing research work on LED lighting. Birds, for those of you who aren't into chickens, the skull of a chicken is thin enough that it absorbs light through the top of its skull. Light is so important to its life. So we were looking at some research work with a Dutch company on different frequencies of LED lighting on poultry. And this one actually we discovered after it was too light. It was too white. It was almost like daylight, bright, sunny daylight white. And actually what chickens want in a shed isn't bright, sunny daylight. But what it caused just here at about 80% production, there's a plateauing there. The birds started eating each other, feather pecking. And it went right to a case where it was sort of almost towards cannibalism, really. So what this tells you is, all this mess here actually tells you that first thing you do when you start to see that sort of behavior is reduce the light. Purple line, reduce the light from 18 looks down to about 12. Didn't seem to produce, people in the shed were saying, oh, they're still pecking each other, so we reduce it down again to about 8 looks. But what you see on the orange line is feed consumption. Almost immediately, the day that we reduced light the first time, feed consumption went up, telling you that the stress had gone off the bird. So maybe we didn't need this here. Because when you look again more subtly, when we dropped the second time, water consumption went down here and your production continued to tail off again here. So it could well be that what we'd actually done to birds coming to Piccolo was restrict their intake because feed consumption dropped again as well. And we should never have done that. So what having this sort of data together has shown us is nowadays on feather pecking, on any of our farms that's got this system in, we will say if feed consumption recovers, your stress has gone off your birds, therefore don't do anything else. Just leave it to settle for a day or two. You've maybe solved the problem already, which is different to what you get to probably veterinary advice up to now. And our veterinary advice has changed because of this. So it just shows the power of what data you have. What's it done for us? Big figures, really. On the rearing unit, we rear about 1.8 million birds a year now, from day old to 16 weeks. These data systems in those sheds. We also provide daylight, actually, which is unusual. We're the only people in the country to do that. But we figure these guys are going to be free range in the future, so they want to know what daylight looks like before they go out at 19 weeks of age. Mortality's gone down from 1.5% to 0.38, which doesn't sound too much, but bear in mind, we rear 1.8 million birds. So you get about 1,200 chickens that don't die. So all of a sudden, those sort of numbers are huge. And an energy saving of 85%, which is in rearing terms, when most of those sheds are at 30 degrees plus, you're putting a lot of energy into them, is huge because we're using it more efficiently. And on the laying units, 20% fall in mortality. These are on the farms, about 30 farms now with this system in, 20% fall in mortality. So that goes down from about 8% mortality down to 6%. So if that rolls out across the other farms in the group and people take this wider to heart, that's the biggest single step forward in free range reduction in mortality there's been in 30 years. So it just shows the power of what this technology can do. And 11.7 more eggs. And ballpark, say a dozen eggs is worth £1. You've got a 32,000 bird unit, you're 30 grand better off. So, you know, it's better welfare, less mortality, and at the same time you make more money. Again, I just love that. If it doesn't make more money, a lot of this technology is useless, I guess. So that, anyway, I'll change the tone completely now. This is I have a bit of a reputation across the industry, and Claire will probably tell you for hugging trees and bunnies, I guess. Started planting trees for poultry in about 1997. Showed that it's much better for mortality and welfare and production. But in the last year or two, ammonia has become much more to the fore from intensive UK livestock, be that dairy, pigs, beef, or poultry. And 88% of the UK emissions of ammonia come from agriculture, and that's gone up in the last 5 years. It hasn't gone down. The only greenhouse gas contributor that's gone up, not down, in the UK since then. And most of the nitrogen sensitive, most of the UK is above nitrogen sensitive limits. I'll show you a map in a minute which shows it even more strongly. And the government in the mainland, in the UK, has said, and they've also followed on part of the Clean Air Act, because particulates and ammonia, as it breaks down, contributes towards 80,000 deaths in the UK every year. So you can guarantee it's up the government's political list. So and what they've said, they will regulate to reduce ammonia. Beauty of what we've got is, and this is a map showing where the bits, guess which of the bits of the country that haven't got too much ammonia? Yeah, you're right, the blue bit at the top. Everywhere else is over the limits for ammonia without causing issues with sensitive flora. And it's dead simple. The policy is dead simple, really. You can see a big green arrow shed. That's the direction of the wind. It blows over the chicken shed or your intensive livestock. Your dairy units are particularly good for this. And it blows all the ammonia plume and all the pollution plume and the dust into the trees. You can't get out the back of the trees, and trees are particularly good at scavenging that sort of pollution out of the atmosphere. And this is some sort of, this work has come from the Centre for Environment and Hydrology. There's a link on a slide later you might be interested in if you're interested any further. And in Edinburgh, effectively, and they do a lot of work on ammonia and moisture absorption from trees. This is simple. You have your chicken shed. That's only a 50-metre wide canopy. You have a main canopy of trees. This plume blows under the main canopy. Can't get out the back because it's trapped by the evergreens at the back. So it goes up through the trees and is filtered. That gives you 30% reduction in ammonia, way beyond what government's asking for at the moment. You increase that to 125 metres of trees, and it goes with 45% of the ammonia. And actually, those figures are very, very conservative. What I've got on the next slide is we've been doing a little bit of work in the last 12 months on half a dozen of our farms and 2 or 3 dairy farms in Cumbria, working with Environment Agency, Natural England, DEFRA, and CEH to do what actually happens on these farms with trees, actually monitor, not just calculated numbers, which the previous slides were. And you can see here, this is one of our own units, 16,000 birds. Bear in mind that the left-hand axis of micrograms of nitrogen per cubic meter, 1 or 2 is over the crisis limit, critical limit for lots of flora and fauna. And you look 20 meters downwind of our chicken shed, and we're giving you 400 into the atmosphere. But you plant the trees, and those had 110 meters of trees downwind of them, and you look, you're back below the level of a critical limit. And what that also does is that places like Cumbria, like Pembrokeshire, like Monmouth area, where you've got intensive livestock and lots of slurry being flown about, your background level could well be 7 or 8. So already your background level is above what's actually the critical limit. So on some of these dairy farms that we were testing, the air goes out the back end of the wood cleaner than it arrived on the farm in the first place, despite the fact there's 300 cows on that unit. That's a story to sell to government. That's a story to demand you want payment for as a farmer from your government going forward. And it's where everybody will be going for in the future. I don't know how long I've gone on for, but I think I've kind of got to where I need to be, but the questions are later. I don't know if that instilled or inspired anybody, but hopefully yes. And I'll try and stop the slide share now. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, David. I made a few notes there. Certainly cutting edge technology, and as somebody who remembers his first Nokia phone and thought it was brilliant because it was totally indestructible. Part of mobile technology now, I wish they still had that same robustness. Yeah, I'm in awe when you look at the technology you're embracing there. I remember looking at environmentally controlled buildings with pig and poultry in my days with BP. But the fact that you've moved on to the sort of data collection and acoustics now is mind-boggling, and I think the ruminant industry is going to have to catch up very, very quickly. So thank you for that. And as you said, we'll have a question and answer session later with Claire. So I thank you for your contribution so far.